You can start.
Okay. I was born in Potosi, Missouri, November 28, 1920, in a house on Mineral Street. And I went to school at Potosi Elementary that was just 2 blocks away. And there were so many people, so many children in first grade. We only went half a day because half went in the morning, half in the afternoon because they didn't have enough seats in the school. And I still remember all of my teachers, but I remembered that one. And we had to make some kind of little booklet, and one thing that really, I remembered that when she gave them out afterwards, mine was gone, and she thought, well, maybe this one person that had moved away, her name was Evelyn, and mine was Esther, and she thought maybe the book, Evelyn got my book by mistake. But anyhow, there were so many of us in first grade, they didn't have enough seats, and I said we only went half a day. But I went in the afternoon, but one morning, Mother said, you're going to school this morning, and I said, I don't go till the afternoon, and she said, oh, the teacher called you one. When I got home at noon that day, I had a baby brother, and back then they didn't tell little ones that the mother was expecting, and so that's how I got my baby brother. I mean, he arrived unexpectedly to me, and in second grade, my teacher was Miss Jenny Litton, and she was very good and very strict, but she made us learn our times tables, and boy, I just worked at night on those, and I just could reel them off real fast. And the third grade I remember, but nothing stands out especially, but in the fourth grade, I had a teacher that was real strict, and she taught us penmanship, and she'd walk up and down the aisles, and I was so afraid of her. My hand would almost shake when she'd walk by, but I've always had, luckily, she taught me penmanship, and I still have good penmanship to this day. And at the end of the school year, she gave me a book, and I said, why? She said, you only missed one spelling word during the whole school year. And I cannot for the life of me remember what that one word was. I'd like to know, because I was always particular about spelling. And another thing, she was so strict. One morning, the Flynn house right across the street, I could see flames coming out the roof. But I was afraid to tell her that house was on fire because I was afraid of her. But this other little boy, Marvin, he spoke, Miss Agatha, that house is on fire. Well, they dismissed school that day because all 12 grades were in that building. But it disrupted things, and the high school boys went over to help carry things out of the house. The whole house wasn't destroyed, but it was enough excitement they couldn't contain the school children the rest of the day. And in the sixth grade, we had to make salt maps of the countries in South America, and that was interesting. They made those at home and brought them to school, and you had to be so careful so that salt wouldn't crack. And the teachers were strict with discipline, and if she'd catch someone doing something, she'd make them come up to the blackboard, and she'd draw a circle down low on the blackboard and make them stand up there, bent over with their nose in that circle. Well, that had the rest of us giggling and laughing and always scared. She said, now if I catch any of you laughing, you're going to be up here too. So we had to really calm it down. And let's see. In seventh grade, I remember that our European history, we had to learn the different kinds of architecture, and I think that was one question I missed on that test because there were 3 of them, and I only got 2 out of the 3. I couldn't think of the third one. And our teacher also taught us about the clouds. And to this day, I'm always studying the clouds and the constellations. She'd tell us to go out at night and find these constellations. I still, at this age, still go out and find my constellations in the sky. In the 8th grade, that teacher was old. She had taught my dad and all of my brothers. I had 3 brothers older than I. And I wasn't afraid of her, but I knew how strict she was. And and she'd stand at the door when you go home at night. If you didn't have enough of your books taken home with you to do your homework, she said, go back and get your arithmetic book, or go get your geography book. But she'd send kids back in to get them. And I was so surprised at the end of that year, as strict as she was, that I was salutatorian in another class. So I guess she made an impression when I studied because, and she had taught my dad, who was a lot older, so, and my brother, so she taught for many years. I had a lot of good teachers in high school, and I got a lot out of high school. I enjoyed it. But I had always lived within 2 blocks of school until I was a junior, and they had built a new high school across town. And Mother was home alone all day, and she'd always want me to come home for lunch. Well, there wasn't any bridge across the creek, and so we had to cross the creek on rocks to get over to school. If it really got up, we had to come uptown and to cross a higher bridge. So I always came home for lunch even then. And I had real good teachers, and I enjoyed my high school, and I was in Glee Club, and we put on operettas. And one incident when we were in Glee Club and we went to state in the contest, they wouldn't let us eat breakfast because said that would affect our singing voice. And one of my friends lived out in the country about 12 miles out. She came in and spent the night with me, and we got up at 2:30 in the morning and walked downtown to the courthouse to catch the bus to go to Columbia. And we didn't win high on that, but we got good scores on our outfits because they liked the blue dotted Swiss dresses we wore, that we all had to dress alike. And we had been to contests at Cape Girardeau also. And so I enjoyed my high school years. And I took sewing, and I wanted so desperately to learn how to be a seamstress for my own pleasure, not publicly, but Mother made all my dresses, and she was a good seamstress. I could show her a picture in a catalog, and she'd get a piece of material, and without a pattern, she could make it just like that in the catalog. But I never was a good seamstress. But we were in operettas and old plays and different things in high school besides all of our, and the girls too, before they got their basketball outfits, we first started out in grade school in the basketball wearing black sateen pants and a blouse because they didn't have uniforms then, but later on there was uniforms you could order out of the catalog and have them before the schools later on got the regular outfits for them to wear for the team. But no, I enjoyed my school years. Then I didn't go to college, and there was a government job. Well, first I worked at a drugstore in town, and I worked 10 hours a day for $1, and we had to stand up all day. And but I enjoyed my work there in the drugstore, Coy Drug. And then one of my friends, a little older, she was working in a dress shop, and she said, she pays better, said, come and ask for my job because I'm going to get to go to the one at the courthouse. And so I was going to get $5 a day there, and I thought that was a big jump from $1 a day. And I worked there a short time, but I wasn't there very long until they had somebody from Jeff City come down and give government tests, and I took the test and made a high score on that. And so one of my friends, I hated that, she was older than I, but I liked Evelyn. She didn't pass the test, so she lost her job at the courthouse. So then I got her job at the courthouse. So I worked at the courthouse then, extension office, and then for the AAA Agricultural Administration. And what I to this day enjoy about that, we sent out letters to all of the farmers in the county, and back then in the 40s there's a lot of farmers. And so I got acquainted with these people, and to this day I still have friends that I made from that association there. I worked there for about 4 years, and then they were laying some off, and shortage in funds. And I had some friends that knew of a government job in Farmington, and they said, I put in an application there, and I got an application, and I got on there right away in the payroll department, and I worked there until they closed out that Farmington office and sent it to Jeff City, and then I was out of work from that for a while, and then I got back on at the courthouse again, and then my husband, I met him. I knew his sisters, but I didn't know him, and so he came in. They had a cattle sale in the fall of the year when they sell their calves, and so he had brought cattle in to this big sale they had out at the cattle barn out on Highway 21 North. And so then they had made a mistake in their check and had given them too much money from that payroll from out there. He came back in the office, and I was at the desk, and I knew his sisters real well. And I said, oh, how about buying a ticket to our club was having a pinochle card party. It was a federated club. And so he bought a ticket, and he came to a party that night, and then I got better acquainted with him. And then I also went to a card party out at Caledonia that the Eastern Star had. So then we started dating, and later on I married him. And he was a farmer. He didn't have to go in war, but his brothers did. And so I lived out there on the farm, but I stayed in the extension clubs. And I know one time his sister said, oh, we'd like to get a club started at Belgrade. Can you help us get a club started? And I said, well, I'll ask the extension home economist. And she said, well, you get 5 women to come to the meeting, I'll get the club started. Well, we got the people, and we had over 30 in our club, and very active in all kinds of community things to better the community. So she was pleased with that. So then, after my children, I had 3 children. After they got in high school, I went back to work at the courthouse. I worked there for a little bit, and then I found out about. Now I didn't go back to the courthouse. The library had an opening, so I went to the library and checked there, and I got onto the library right away, and I worked there until I retired a few years ago. And I went on the bookmobile, and I went all over the county, and I enjoyed that so much because I already knew these people sort of from the agricultural program I was on, because I met these people from the 11 townships, and then I got to get reacquainted with them through the library. And then I stayed at the library until I retired, so I've been retired for several years now. But I don't know what it was.
Okay. You look familiar.
Oh,
I don't know.
Well, you do too.
How long ago you retired? About 17 years ago from the library?
Let's see. Yeah, about 12, 13.
So you were working at the library between like 65 and 70? 1970?
Let's see.
The book
See, I was born in 20, and I retired in 90 because I was 70 years old when I retired. There wasn't any retirement or anything. But
when did you start at the library?
Let's see.
You retired about 1973?
I guess.
Because I was going to high school between...
Because I was at the library, but when it was up there close to where Ozark Federal was. So we moved the library from there down to a brand new building down there by Booyard Lumber. I hadn't been down there very long, but I helped with all this move. And the lady at the front desk had to leave early. Somebody came to pick her up. And so the librarian, Margaret Casey, Larry Casey's wife, asked me if I'd go up the front desk in case we had any customers, because it's just a few minutes till closing. So I went up there because she was working on a government grant with somebody, and she wanted to get it in the mail that evening. And at 5 o'clock, I went back to talk to her. She said, "Let's lock the door." Said, "I want to get this project finished and get it to the post office," because the mail went out at 5:45 or something. And I said, "Margaret," or Mrs. Casey, I probably then, because she was my superior. And I said, "What's that awful smell?" I said, "I don't know. I don't smell anything, but I've got an awful headache." Well, I lived on a farm south of town. And that night, after we had eaten dinner, my husband's father lived with us. And they had the news on at 5 minutes to 7. And they said the Washington County Library burned. And they said, "Well, that must have been over in Illinois. That couldn't have been in Potosi, because I had just come home from there." And after I left work that evening, when I told her I smelled something, she had mailed the letters and had gone home, and the building burst into flame. It exploded. So we just got out of there in time. And they never did know, but they thought, it's a brand new building, we were the first occupants, that there must have been a faulty wiring in the ceiling, and it must have been smoldering that I smelled something. But the smoke hadn't come down into the interior. But oh, that devastated. It just exploded, period. So then we drove back into town that night to see what was left of the building, and it was just in shambles. So then I asked the librarian, I said, I don't know what, anyhow, I was talking to her there. And she said, "Well, don't come to work in the morning because there's no place to work." And but the next morning I had to go in anyhow, just to see what was left of it, because it's still smoking that night. And she said, "Well, the board meeting is having a meeting up in the basement of the Presbyterian Church that they don't know where they'll start or what they'll do." And so then I didn't have to work that day. And then the next day she told me to come in, and by then it had quit smoldering. And so this one district library supervisor, he came. Was always dressed in a suit and white tie, and white shirt and tie and all. But the Presbyterian minister, Reverend O'Daniel, he loaned him a pair of overalls because they were both short in stature, and Ron got those on. He couldn't buckle both straps, but he had that. And he was down there in his white shirt and all helping it. They said, "Don't go in there, something might fall, but tell them what to bring out," because I knew what was important and what wasn't until we could see what could be done. So we checked out books. We had a certain place that we kept them and the files, registration files of all the people with library cards. And I'd stand outside there and I'd tell them, "Get on this desk over there, there," and I'd tell them what was important. And they brought it out. And some people that used to have a machine shop, it had been abandoned and some of the windows were cracked in it, but it was a huge empty building. So they made arrangements to rent that. And they hauled the things up there. And so then we worked through those salvage materials and all that smoked and charred things. You'd get that in your lungs and you just was coughing it up and everything. But then the state loaned us some tables and chairs and some filing cabinets, and then we salvaged. Wasn't many books that we could salvage because most of them were charred too bad. But we had a bookmobile, and the bookmobile wasn't in the building, and it didn't get destroyed. So we did have that nucleus to start from. And the state came to our rescue, and they sent a bookmobile down to help out so we could operate out of the bookmobile. Our other one operated out in the county, and they sent books, and they sent some old shelving, and they sent various supplies and different people and library centers, things, and then to try to help us out, they had these government programs where they have these high school kids that work through the summer, I don't know, they must have sent us about 6 or 8 of those. Well, we were in such a state of upheaval, we couldn't supervise them because we weren't organized, and they were off. They were a lot of help, but anyhow, the help did help because what they could, they scrubbed and cleaned, but most of the books weren't. Even the cards that we had to work were charred, and you go home at night and you just cough up that old charred smoke and stuff from the materials you worked with all day. But we kept going, and we built back. So I was always proud of my experience at the library. And then later on, the librarian I was working for, we finally got moved in the Masonic Hall. They let us use it. And our librarian was taking some, she wasn't a certified librarian, and she was taking some courses in Columbia. And on her way back to Columbia, she was in a car wreck and from then she was a vegetable, and she lived about a week, and she died. So then we had to get a new person to run the library. And they offered it to 2 of us girls that worked there in the library, but I said I didn't want it. And the other one didn't either. So they finally got a school teacher that wasn't a librarian, but she decided to come over and try to run the library, so she did. And so we had it there in the Masonic Hall for a long time. And then on Saturday, we still had some school children on a government program that come in and help. I remember that one Saturday, only one of the main helpers was there to supervise these kids or to check out books to the public. And that one Saturday morning, I told the ones that were, I said, get outside quick. Well, what's the matter? I said, we're having an earthquake. And we had just had shelves up on concrete blocks with books on it. I didn't know what was going to happen. Luckily, it didn't amount to anything, but everything was shaking, and we were in such temporary circumstances that nothing serious happened. So I went through the fire and and then we finally, well, before we moved there, when we were up at the other building, at noon in December, it was customary once a month the heads of the different government organizations would have a meeting and discuss different things about the community. Well, this time, they had met at the library at noon, and all the top heads of the different departments had their Christmas dinner there. And then that night, our tornado went through town, and it blew the library away. And I didn't know about it till the next morning. I had a brother in Texas. He said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Blew the library away last night." And I heard from it from Texas before I did locally. So I came into town the next morning, and we'd had hard rains and everything was a disaster. So then we tried to decide what we were going to do. So then the library workers we donned wintertime in December, and we bundled up in boots and coats and everything, and we worked to see what we could salvage out of the library, because we had outstanding historical collections that other people didn't even have. We had a rare collection. So then they got some people to help, and we'd tell them what to box and where to put things. And then Lion's Den offered us what's their old building now. That was their only building at that time. And we carried them down. They carried them down there. So then we bundled up, because there wasn't any heat in the building. So we bundled up and went down there later. And some of the books we'd hold to our face to see if they were wet or cold, or just see whether it's worth salvaging, because they were so rare that they didn't want to dispose of anything if it could even be restored. And but we nearly freeze to death. Our hands and feet would get so cold. But we worked down there for a long time. That's when, after that, then's when they let us come back up to the Masonic Hall. And so that's when we were in the Masonic Hall, that the little earthquake was shaking the books. So I thought, what else is going to happen? And because we'd lost our librarian, and we had the fire and the earthquake, and So that was when I had some working on Saturday for me, and I said, get outside, because I was afraid the books, it wasn't very severe, but with not very stable shelving, just on concrete blocks, I was afraid somebody might get hurt. And from then they just tried to find some place there. We were in the Masonic Hall for a while. And so that's when our librarian died. She had been going to school in Columbia, and she was a bad wreck, and then she didn't recover from that, and she died. So then they needed a librarian, and they offered it to me, but I didn't want it, and offered it to another one. So they asked Levon and I if we would both keep it running until they could find somebody, because we were both knowledgeable in our own departments. And so we did, and then finally one of the high school teachers decided to quit teaching, and she came aboard to run it. But I mean, she had to learn what it's all about, I mean, from the library point of view, but we were able to help her and work with that. And I went out in the bookmobile, and I enjoyed all of my people out in the county. I didn't want to give that up and come in to be librarian then. So I know one time when I was having, at the mines, they were having open house. They let people go down in under the shaft, down underground. I didn't want to go down underground, but a lot of people did. But I was just walking around there, and I heard this one little, Grandma, that's the bookmobile lady. That's the bookmobile lady. So the school kids from all over the county knew me by face, whether they knew me by name or not, didn't matter. And
now, what was your name before you were married?
Farrell, F-A-R-R-E-L.
And where did you grow up?
Here in Potosi.
Here in Potosi?
Mm-hmm. You look familiar.
Mike Albert's my name.
Hmm?
Mike Albert?
Mike Albert.
Albert.
Albert. Mm-hmm. Oh, are you from the Quaker area?
No.
They didn't have any relatives out?
Belgrade.
Belgrade area out that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I grew up there. I don't live there anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, then who did you marry?
I married Albert Mitchell. The Mitchells from Caledonia. I don't know if you knew any of them or not. You knew Ruth Turner that had the store there. That was my sister-in-law.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your parents' name?
What? Who?
What were your parents' names?
My parents' name, Farrell, F-A-R-R-E-L.
What was his first name, your dad?
My dad's name was James, and he worked at Toll's Grocery. Then I don't know, I had brothers Clarence and Newton and Floyd. Then Robert was a younger one, was younger than I. I had 4 brothers. And but you look so familiar that I just feel like I
go down to the library quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I finally retired from there when I got 70. I quit cold turkey. There wasn't any retirement, no insurance or anything. But
did you just live in a house here in town?
I do now.
Or did you back in, like when you were going to grade school?
Oh, in grade school, yes. I just lived a couple blocks from school. I lived across from the windmill. I don't know, that windmill's still there on Mineral Street, but the top of it's off. Because back then, a lot of people didn't have city water then, and people didn't have good cisterns or wells. And when the wind would blow, people from all over the hillside would come with their buckets to get water when the wind would blow. Later on, Jack White, I don't know if you knew Frank or Jane, later on they would put a pump in there and they could pump water because they had water a lot of livestock, and so they did that. But when the pump was pumping, white people could get water until water was accessible through the city.
Now, did you live in that house all through your school years?
Mm-hmm.
Same house?
Yeah.
Can you remember the evolution of that, like when you're really young, when you had running water or when you got electricity?
Well,
or telephone?
okay. Yeah, we were fortunate. We had a telephone when I was a child, when I was young. There wasn't very many telephones in town, but if some people had to get messages to somebody, they would call us and have them delivered to the neighbors, or if they were close enough, they could come to the phone, they could come back and then call or get the message.
And how did that telephone work?
What?
How did you operate the telephone?
Oh, it was a box on the wall, and you cranked the handle. It wasn't the little headphone. I mean, it was, the regular telephone boxes like they had back then.
And then you rang it?
You rang it, and you got an operator here in town, and you gave them the name or the number. They had telephone directories. There wasn't very many people had telephones, but then they would put out the little telephone directory, and we could call.
So you didn't really have a phone number?
Didn't have what?
You didn't have phone numbers?
Oh, yes.
You did have a phone number? Mm-hmm. So you'd call somebody, you wouldn't ask for that person to the operator, you'd say, give me this number?
You could get either way if you didn't have a directory. I mean, I think it was just like a cardboard sheet or something, because back then there wasn't very many. I mean, not like the directories we have now, but there was because there wasn't many people had telephones back in the 20s.
So you didn't live on a farm, so you didn't have to do farm work?
Well, I did live on the farm later. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I married my husband
But while you were living here?
Oh, not in town. No, not in town. No, until after I got married.
What kind of heat did you have?
Wood. Dad would have people, he'd ordered from people, and they'd bring a big truckload of wood in, and he had somebody else that had they pulled a little, I don't know, it was motor or fire-operated saw that they hitched on behind their truck or something, and they'd bring it in and they would saw it up. And then we had a wood shed, and we stacked it in the wood shed according to others for the kitchen or the bigger wood for the other.
Did you have a refrigerator or an ice box?
I had an ice box, because back then you had a sign you put on the door, 25, 50, 75, or 100, and the ice truck would come by, and they'd chip off that much and bring it in. If you want 25 pounds or 50, whatever you had signed, they'd bring it up and bring it in the house and put it in your ice box. And you had a pan underneath. When the ice would melt, you'd have to take it outside and empty the water. But we were lucky enough that we had an ice box, so that was a big help.
Did you have a garden?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And in the fall of the years, when they'd rake leaves, they would put them on gardens, a big garden for mulch. And then we lived right across the street from a farm where they had the windmill, and so Dad would have manure hauled from over there and have it plowed under for the garden. But we had a big garden. Even my brother had I can't think what you called it now, a plot, and he had, I can see it, but I can't think what you called it now. He made this early garden, and he had it covered over, and he could put lettuce and radishes out before it was warm enough to plant the main garden.
Did you have animals?
We didn't have any animals, not here in town. Now, when I married my husband, we had animals out there. We had a lot of cattle.
What year did you get married?
1946.
So you got married after the war?
Mm-hmm.
Did you say you were born in 1920?
20, uh-huh.
So you're about 9 years old, I guess, when the stock market crashed.
Yeah.
And then years after that, the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice at that young age?
No, I didn't.
Change in anything?
I really didn't, from the standpoint, my father worked in a general merchandise store, and people brought butter and all different things in that they sold there at the store. The buttermilk, people used a lot of buttermilk back then. And I know this one colored fella that since they didn't have taxis or thing to ride in, he would walk up the house and he would bring us butter and eggs and stuff that people had brought into the store, and then he would bring it up to our house.
Do you remember his name? Do you remember his name?
Yeah. Liz Jennings. Did you know Barbara Jennings? No, or Zelma or Rose or any of those patients.
So the Depression didn't affect you?
No, I really wasn't affected by it.
Did you make your own clothes?
Yes. My mother was a good seamstress, but she was in poor health, didn't get out much, and my dad worked in this general merchandise store, and when they get new bolts of material in, Mother would have me go down to the store, and Dad would just cut off a little tiny sliver, or maybe a ½ inch wide, just little, and I'd pick out what I thought she would like or I would like. I'd maybe take 3 or 4 of those little strips of material home, and then she could pick out what she wanted, and then we bought the yardage we needed for the garments. But she could look at a picture in a catalog and make it from just looking at the picture.
Where was the store at that your dad worked at?
It's down here in the dip. The McCalls have that brick building there on the right.
And what kinds of things did they sell in there?
They sold everything. Well, I say almost everything, because they even had big like catalogs, and they had material, wool patches in there. If they wanted them to order a suit or something for a man, they could. But after the book would be 3 or 4 years later, when they wasn't using it for the samples anymore, because the books were about that thick and way big, Mother would take these samples out there, and she would sew them together and make a comforter, and because they were wool, and then she would line it with flannelette and cotton and put it in a frame and tuck and made.
You had mail order? Did you mail order from the store?
I was trying to think. Oh, no, this was from the store that I'm talking about. I'm going to say, I don't know when we started getting mail orders. I don't remember how old was it. I guess it was pretty soon after that, I guess, because we used to get Sears and Montgomery. So I guess that was back in the 20s or early 30s that we got that book through the mail, and we'd order through the mail order.
Did you have an automobile?
Yes. My dad would not drive, but when my oldest brother got old enough to drive, Dad bought a car. And so my brothers all drove, and he would take us different places. But my dad didn't want to even ride to and from work. They wanted to go and get him from work because he worked all day. And he had varicose veins in his legs so bad, but he said, no, I'm going to walk. I don't want to ride. He didn't like to ride in a car. But
remember what kind of car it was?
It was a Chevrolet in the 20s.
In the 20s?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of clubs did, during the 30s, you're talking about clubs that they had? Did they have these related to the Depression in any way, or what were they about? You said you had the Eastern Stars. That's something else, I guess.
Yeah, that's East. I wasn't connected with any of that.
You weren't involved with them until after?
No. No, they were back then, but I wasn't.
When you worked at the courthouse, you said you worked for the AAA?
Mm-hmm. Agriculture Adjustment.
Was that a program from the New Deal or the Depression era?
It was something to try to help the farmers all over the county.
About when did you start working there at the courthouse the first time?
Let's see. I guess 39.
Do you remember how that program worked or what you did?
Well, we had to get letters out to all the farmers all over the county, telling them whatever the program was. We had other men, but we were just the girls that had to get the letters mailed to them. And I think I'm trying to think. Seems like then they had men that went out to the farmers and told them about whatever the program was all about. But we had to get out those letters to them. That's how I got it. And then some of them had to come into the office to see about their allotment on certain grains or things. And
do you remember? Can you remember when Pearl Harbor happened?
Oh yes.
What were you doing?
Well, didn't that happen on a Sunday night?
Well, you probably heard about it on a Sunday night.
Mm-hmm. Because I had a younger brother, and he had gone to the movies, and he came home and he said, "Something's happened." You know, he didn't get all of the news. I mean, just because the movie didn't have it, but heard people talking when it was over. And then we turned on the radio that night because we were lucky enough we had a radio. and we listened to the radio. And when I went to work the next morning at the courthouse, I don't know if the president or somebody made a speech, 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And so they had all the ones from the different offices. Everybody didn't have a radio, but they had a radio and had several people from the offices come in and listen to I guess the president spoke or whoever out of Washington, D.C. spoke and told about the war. But I remember that Sunday night and then that next Monday morning on the radio.
And you're still living here in Potosi at that time? With your parents?
Oh, yes, No, let's see.
You would have been about 20 years old, 21.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I was.
Somebody before was telling me, I was asking about maybe after the war started, anything they remember about civil defense in this area?
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying something about having a lookout in the courthouse, in the tower in the courthouse. Do you remember anything like that?
Having what at the courthouse?
In the courthouse up in the tower, that they had people that would watch for airplanes.
Oh.
Do you remember
I don't.
about that?
I don't remember the airplanes.
Do you remember any of the civil defense during World War II? Any kind of programs for that?
No, I don't remember. I wasn't involved, and I just don't remember.
They didn't have blackout curtains or anything like that?
No.
No air raid drills?
No.
Do you remember going to the movie theater in town?
Oh yeah, I mean, I went to it, but...
Remember anything about how it was set up or what it cost to go to the movies?
Well, I remember the old Delco Theater back in the early 20s, and then we got the Plaza Theater, the nicer one up there in the Western Bayette.
What was that? I haven't heard about the Delco Theater. What was
that was in the... That was in the 20s, early 30s.
What was it called?
Delco, D-E-L-C-O.
That was the name
George Wallace that had the store out at Old Mines. He owned it and operated it.
Where was it located?
Across from where the bank is now. Oh, I don't know what's in there now. That's changed so much. We got so many secondhand stores and things in there. No, I don't know what's... But they tore down the building, of course, and have modern buildings now. But, the Delco Theater was quite the place to go back in the 20s, early 30s.
So they had electric, I guess.
I guess they did, or power generated.
Did you say you had electric in your house?
Yeah. So they did have electric in town.
It wasn't the Delco system, it was regular electric?
Mm-hmm.
Because there was I guess, electrical system called the Delco. That's why I was wondering if that theater was called Delco or what it was.
That was the name of it.
Okay.
That was the name of it.
And what was it like going in it? I guess they were playing.
Oh, the theater?
Were they still playing silent movies there?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do they have a piano player in there?
Yeah, oh, yes.
Yeah.
Those jazzy tunes. Before and after.
Do you remember any of the other businesses in town during your school years?
Well,
I guess you did your shopping. Did you do your shopping at the general store?
General merchandise store. Mm-hmm. There were some other stores and restaurants and banks and all in town. That they used to have a cobbler that repaired shoes and the cleaners and different things.
You mentioned something about townships. Are you familiar with how they work?
What was it?
You mentioned something earlier about townships.
Township?
You're familiar with all the townships?
Yeah, there's 11 townships. I'm still familiar with all of them.
And
I've been to all of them a lot of times.
And What is the purpose of the township, do you know?
Well, that was just an area divided. I mean, just like you have towns, or there was border lines, and every state was marked off that way. They had by townships.
Did the township, was that for postal service? Or
Well,
just another subdivision of a county?
Well, postal partly, but I don't know if there's any other area, any reason for that. But even once in a while in the paper, there'll be something about some township, or they'll show a picture or part of one, and I think, oh, that's familiar to me. I know where that is.
Or maybe that has to do with voting? People
Well,
area.
voting.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I don't know. It's just, I don't know what made the division, why there's a divisional line like that. But there was 11 townships, and I was familiar with all of them.
Do you remember anything about the tip digging around this area?
Very little. I wasn't involved with any of that, but my dad worked at this Toll's General Merchandise and Hardware, and people had to dig tips, and they said that was horrible, you know, the hard work it was. And they would bring their wagons, and I had been down to the store a time or two, and they would bring them in the back, and they had big scales, and they could walk their team across it and get the team off of it, and the wagon with the tiff on it, and they weighed it to see how many tons they had on it. I think they could weigh it up at the depot too, but a lot of them weighed them there at tolls besides at the depot. Then they'd take it up the depot, and I guess they had to unload there, and the trains would haul it off, but at least they knew how much weight was theirs in tiff. It was
the store would give them some kind of receipt.
give them something to show what the weight was. But I remember seeing those wagons.
You said you had brothers that went into service during World War II?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like when do you remember what branch of service they went in, or when they went away?
I guess my two brothers, I guess, were both in the Army. My older brother, he was married and in California, and had two children, but he still was so patriotic. He was determined he was going to go back in, so he brought his family back here, and he went in, and he was in the, I don't know what you call it, patrol division in Austria and Germany. And
He had lived
then his wife and children lived here till he came out of service, and then they moved back to California because he worked in a bank out there.
But before he went to California to begin with,
he worked in a bank here in Potosi before he.
About how old was he when he moved to California to begin with?
That was in the 30. He was around 30.
So he grew up.
Oh yeah, he grew up here in Potosi. Uh-huh.
And then your other brother?
He was my younger brother, and he decided to go in service, and he was in the Army. And
did you write letters to him while they were?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm. Then I had friends in the service, and they'd write to me, and I'd get letters quicker than some of their family would. And they said, "What'd you hear from over? What's happening in Europe? And what's happening?" But I had correspondence with several servicemen.
Did you get interesting letters?
What?
Interesting letters? Or
yeah, they were interesting. Mm-hmm. They weren't allowed to tell too much, but there was always something in there that I could communicate to some of their families and tell them what was happening over there. But it was interesting.
Do you remember what kind of, did you have certain kind of entertainment while you were going to school? As far as friends getting together and doing different things.
Oh, at school?
At school or later,
okay.
Different kind of get-together parties or...
Well,
dances?
I was trying to think of so many different things. I had to slow down and back up. One thing I'll never forget, Dr. Cresswell's daughter was in my class. We were about 3rd or 4th grade, and she had a Halloween party. She lived down there where the beauty shop is now, across from the little city park. And someone got outside and scratched on the screens and all, and scared us kids, and they'd knock on the door. And we were running through the house screaming. We just knew that was ghosts because we were small enough that we didn't know the difference between what was ghost and wasn't. But, and I think it was in the 4th grade, and Lori Needham's father had a store down on Main Street across from the store where my dad worked, and the teacher picked out 3 of us girls to fix the Valentine box. And I was chosen, and I was so proud that I got to go decorate this fancy box that we took to school, and everybody put their Valentines in it, and then on Valentine's Day they'd call them out, and people would get Valentines from their different friends.
Did you bring your own lunch to school?
I lived close enough I could walk home, but some of them, those here in town, was close enough walked home, and others brought their lunch. But I know that sometimes in the morning, the kids at recess say, "Oh, we're going to give the teacher a fruit shower at noon." Well, some of them did have to bring their lunch, so they couldn't. But the rest of us that could, we'd go home. "Mom, you got a banana or an apple or something?" And we'd take it in. We'd slip it in, put it on her desk during the lunch hour before the bell rang for us to start back school at 1 o'clock.
Did you visit other towns around this area?
Did we do what?
Did you visit other towns around the area? Or
I was just trying to think for school if they had competition. The basketball and different track teams and different things around the state. In the county or surrounding counties that they had contests or competition. Because my 2 older brothers were good basketball players, and I know that they played basketball a lot, even more. I don't think my brother did, but another man is still living that married my sister-in-law. Where the Masonic Hall is, back in the early 20s, they played basketball in there because it didn't have a gymnasium. So when I give tours for the Historical Society, I tell the youngsters, I said, this used to be a basketball. They played basketball here because kids have everything so modern now they can't imagine not having it been that way all their lives.
Do you remember what the roads were in town?
What?
Do you remember what the roads were like in town?
Yeah, they'd have to come by and grade them and try to smooth them. They were just gravel roads.
Do you remember when 21 Highway got paved?
I don't know what year they paved it.
21 used to come through town.
Yeah, oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But as far as you remember, it was always paved going through town?
Well, they gravelled it, they graded it and gravelled it, but I don't know when they blacktopped it. I don't have any idea what year it was. I remember when the school burned. Did I tell you about that yet? Where the administration building is now. Do you know where the administration building is? Up on Pine Street. Well, they had all 12 grades in that building. But anyhow, I went there for 10 and a half years there till they got the new building over where they are. Well, of course, they got some main buildings now. What's middle school over there now is 7th and 8th grade. That used to be the high school. But the night that the building burned, I was married and I was living in the south end of the county. And I'm a Catholic. I like to go to midnight mass for Christmas. So my husband and I came in and spent the night. and had gone to Mass, come home, gone to bed. But we decided to stay in that night. And I was upstairs after we'd gone to bed, and I thought, well, that's strange. Somebody just turned on the hall light. I could hear the switch or saw the light around the crack in the door or something. And I just laid there because I wasn't sleeping. And somebody knocked on my door, and I said, okay, come in. And my brother opened the door. He said, I don't want to scare you, but said the school building is on fire. Well, I was expecting any time, and he's afraid I'd hear all that noise and I'd go into labor because I had already been to the doctor that day, and he said, well, any time now, go home until you have to come back to the hospital in Ironton. And so I got up, and my husband got up and dressed too, and they went over to the fire. I didn't go over there, but Mother and I sat downstairs and watched from the backyard there, and we could see most of it. But I remember that burning at Christmas time so vividly. But having gone to school there for 10 and a half years, I missed the building. It had a lot of memories.
Do you remember when the war was over?
Well, when
celebrations or anything?
Yes, because when it was over in Europe, it was in May, and on Tuesday night at church we had a prayer service. It was every Tuesday we did. So some of my friends and I went to service that night. So they had what they called the Question Club. It was a dance club or a restaurant, but they only had like a dance on Saturday night. But through the week you could go in and get you a Coke, or the men could get a beer, and they had Nickelodeon and they could dance. So we thought, oh, there'd be a lot of people from town down there because the war was over in Europe. We went down there and nobody showed up. I mean, there wasn't 10 people down there that night. But then when the war was over in August, I was in Washington, D.C. at that time visiting a girlfriend, and we had dates with soldier men that night. And we were on the White House lawn when the president came out and said the war is over. Talk about being at the right place at the right time. I never will forget that. Oh, the place was surrounded with people. And of course, it was using public transportation because we were dating these guys in service, and we thought we never would get home that night because people were just thronging in the streets. Washington, D.C. was just alive with people, everybody out happy. But I thought I was lucky to be there where I was. Big thrill. It was the war, especially if the war was over, but then to be there in Washington, D.C. at that time was unusual.
Then you remember your brothers getting back home? Then you remember your brothers coming back home?
Oh, yes, my brother in Europe finally got back, and then I had two brother-in-laws that were in the Navy, and they eventually got home too.
Were they from Washington County?
Oh yeah.
What were their names? What were their names?
Bob Mitchell and Ken Mitchell from Caledonia. We lived out there on the Mitchell Curve. They still call it the Mitchell Curve, even though we sold the property. I sold the property after my husband died. It's not Mitchell's anymore, but there was a vicious curve there, and so many wrecks. And I never will forget that one night. It was way below zero, and we didn't have a furnace in the house, and we had wood stoves, but we used electric blankets too. That one night after midnight, somebody had a bad wreck, and of course the electric was off. Well, boy, did it ever get cold. So we didn't have furnace, and hadn't kept up the fire that great in the wood stove. But there's a lot of wrecks on that curve.
Okay, well, the hour's about up.
Oh, okay.
Last an hour, and so.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I get these people waiting on me to catch